And this time round, what we're really going to talk about is the craft of writing. So I thought I would start, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I thought I would start by asking Wes why he does certain things.
We'll circulate these around
Okay.
if you're interested in.
You have the Poacher's End. If anybody wants Poacher's End, we're going to look at that one quite a bit, and Rocks and Clouds. Firstly, mostly everybody reads this online. You all know that because this is very unusual to actually have these. It's great that you do that, Wes, that you can get it in paperback. But I just want you to know that you actually have to do original cataloguing on these books because they're not available in any other library in paper. So anyway, so I've just started the beginning of the book, which has a very nice, good and deep descriptions, and it's in the voice of Monica. Monica is Frank Mattertuck's girlfriend. And so what I thought was very interesting, because we will have another little piece afterwards, is this is like a kind of a feminine description. So I don't know if you do this consciously, because what I'm really trying to do is find out from Wes what things he writes consciously and what you write unconsciously, because that's the craft of writing. And so we'll just start off with this, and also there's a little teaser in there, and I don't know if you do that deliberately or not. So let's just see page 57. So this is Monica, and so she's talking about her relationship with him, and then I'll just give you this little piece because it has the teaser in it. She says, it was one thing to be confident and self-assured as an individual. It's quite another to feel that one is worthy of truly being loved and appreciated. Another demon had to do with his time in the army with special forces. On that front, she knew almost nothing except that it haunted him. Whatever he'd been involved with, it haunted him. So that's our little teaser to know that the series is not finished with this book.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a nice, like, very sort of soft way that that she's thinking about him on her way to visit him. So is this something that you consciously have a different voice for Monica than you do for the guys?
Yes, yeah, and I actually do that with characters too. If you notice dialogue, each character has their own unique dialect that they draw from. Some of them are more generic, some of them are more pronounced. It depends on what kind of background I created for them. So as we think about craft of writing, and when we shift from Susan's section here and talking about the books to the craft of writing, we can dive into this a little bit more. But you should have a deep and a rich understanding of your characters and their background and what drives them, what motivates them. And so that's where that comes from. There's been a lot of thought about Monica and who she is. For those who haven't read the books, Monica is an attorney in a neighboring town, and she's now rekindled this relationship with the main character, Frank Mattertuck. And so she has her own background. She's a very well-established attorney. She's embedded in the community in ways that she's very, very active. So she's her unique individual. I didn't want some, 1950s Donna Reed type character. I wanted someone who was very much on her own and very independent as well. And Frank respects that and likes that about her. So their relationship is very mutually respecting. In the last book, she actually is, I don't want to do any spoilers, not the last book, but the third one, I should say, because the series is going to go on and on and on. But in the third one, she's actually the one who winds up being the hero of the book. So, but your question is how conscious of that. I would say it's more conscious with Monica than it is other characters, just because you probably haven't noticed I'm a guy. so crawling into that kind of mindset is more of a challenge when you're crossing the gender lines. So, Bruce?
Yeah. When you're thinking about writing a book of this nature, or a series in particular, how much work do you do in defining the characters, their backstory,
Quite a bit, and it depends on the character. So Frank, it was a little bit easier because he's kind of been a character that's been germinating for a long time. He's a charter boat captain. I was a charter boat captain. He's in Alaska, in a place that I lived. He's post-military. I'm post-military. You know, there's a lot of things about Frank that are drawn from who I am as well. Much that is not, by the way, and that's important never to create a character who is you on paper. But Monica took a lot more thought because for the things that I just said. Fortunately, I'm married to an attorney, so she has been somebody who has given a lot of input, and she reviews. There's places where we get into Monica and the case that she's working, and those are vetted by my wife, and I get a legal education on, no, that's not how it's done, and things like that. So if you can tap into somebody, that's always very helpful. Maureen and I were talking before we got going about write what you know. I know nothing about being an attorney, but I have a resource. Was it Samuel Johnson? I think it was Samuel Johnson. Webster's Dictionary said there's two kinds of knowledge. One is that you carry around in your head, and the other is where you know where to get it. So, they both are equal. They're useful things, so draw on those. But again, some of the minor characters, I've gone into quite a bit of what their background is. So Earl Derrick is one that when I wrote Skipper's Oath as the first book, Earl Derrick comes in there, he was supposed to die. And he wound up just being useful, frankly. And so then, on the fly, after the first book was already started, I went back and built a whole history and character. I go back to childhood, what kinds of things are there that influence him. Why is he the way he is? He was the town drunk, but he becomes a business partner for Frank. What kind of a person would be able to make that kind of transition? You need to think about that stuff and think about what kind of background is going to make that believable. Because otherwise, you're going to have a character that at some point, number one, you're going to get tripped up. We were talking about the little details. Yeah. Each one of these books are about 400 pages. It's easy to lose track of those details. So if you don't spend some time developing your character and creating a background for them, you're going to get tripped up on your own details. You're going to throw something in there because it's useful for this part of the book. 200 pages later, this character is going to come back into the book and it touches on that thing, and you don't remember what you did. You can go back and read it, but you're not going to remember everything. So it's really important to have, and different people do it differently. Some will create a whole, separate file for those people. You may even, there's some tools out there that you can use that will help prompt you, excuse me, help prompt you on what kind of background they have, what was their childhood, what school did they go to, give it a name, all those things. I don't go to that detail. To me, I don't care what the name of the elementary school that Monica went to, but I do care where she was educated for her legal degree, where she's licensed, how she became an attorney. It turns out that she took over her dad's practice, so there's a history on him too. He's not even in the books, but I have a history for him because it feeds into Monica's history. So those things are very important. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you answered the second question I was going to ask about how do you keep track of it? And you said you have all the software.
Yeah, actually, I don't do it as much as some people do. The tool that I mentioned, I don't use it.
Yeah, I don't either. I have like a paper file that I write.
Yeah.
The character and what they're about and the next character.
Yeah.
Just so I can go back and see myself.
Yeah, I create a separate file for them, and then I pull that file into the document when I'm writing, drafting a book. I pull it in there so that I can get to it very easily, or I'll toggle between the two documents.
Do you also do such activities for events in the past? Things that will have an effect on people, but they, as a character, in a sense, would need their own history.
Yes, yeah. So Frank Manituck, for example, she mentioned the military special forces background. There was an event that happened there that's caused his haunting, from what she read. But he also was in the U.S. Park Service for a stint, and almost nobody knows about that. And he was a backcountry ranger that was in a law enforcement branch that isn't well known with the Park Service. And so that feeds into, there's a subplot there with the Ewing, which is this kind of big organization that's behind some drug cartels and stuff like that. He inadvertently came upon an operation. I'm giving stuff away now that it's not in the books yet. It will be. He came across an operation and almost brought this whole organization down. From their perspective, they think that he knew what he was doing. He didn't. He was just doing his job, and he has no idea that they exist now, but they think that he does. So that subplot is going to be ended up, I'm going to end it with the 4th book because too many people don't like it. It's confusing. There was a review recently that said, I feel tricked because there's this hook out there, you know, and I understand marketing, but I feel like, you know, I'm being dragged along because of the subplot. My intention, my thinking was, the subplot's just a nice, interesting subplot. You know, each book stands alone, and they do, except for that subplot. But getting back to that, in the 4th book, I'm going to end that. So it's going to come to a head. They're going to go after him full board, and he's going to have to respond to that, and that'll be the crux of that book. So, but I want to kill off the Ewing. I loved it when I started. Now I'm like, yeah, it's not working very well, so I'll get rid of it. That's the downside of a series, by the way. You start writing something, you're stuck with it because it's out there now. You know, so if you're going to do something with it, you have to do it on the fly.
How did you start writing? What got you into writing?
7th grade is actually before that. So, you know, I'm one of those people that will say I always knew I was a writer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have my job here that I do, but that's not what I wanted to do,
right.
And it's not what I thought I was going to do, and this really is an outlet for what the real me is, you
right.
know, without having to depend on the big 5 publishers and everything. So, so I remember sometime before 7th grade, I remember my brother and I were really into Western novels because my grandfather kind of got us into them. And I said, hey, Kenny, let's write a Western book. We could do this, you know. So we started writing this novel, and by page 5, he was out of it. He didn't want any part of it anymore. This is boring. Let's go outside and play instead. And I tried to continue with it. Have no idea what happened to that. Don't know what the story was. All I can tell you is it was a Western. And I got, I don't know, maybe 30 pages into it, and then it disappeared. So, but 7th grade, in my basic ed class, we were told to write some kind of a story. So I did a UFO abduction story, and the teacher loved it. Now, mind you, before that, I was an unknown in his classroom, Mr. Conklin, and I'm still in touch with him now. I didn't even think he knew my name, but all of a sudden he came into class and he read it out loud to the class, and he praised it up and down, and he pointed out all these things that were in there that were ahead of a 7th grader's thinking. And I thought, wow, you know, so maybe this is something that could really become something for me. Ever since then, I've been writing in different venues, whatever opportunity there was. I spent quite a bit of time in the 90s doing nature review articles. There's the Fargo Forum and the Star Trib in Minneapolis sent me out doing backpacking trips so that I could write these pieces for them, and you can dig them up probably in their archives. But they're essentially travel pieces, you know, but it gave me an outlet.
Yeah.
And it gave me a place that I can say, wow, I'm published now, you know.
Yeah. And when did you first finish a book? How did you put it all together? Because that's where I feel like it's hard for all your thoughts, make them cohesive.
Yes, yeah, it is. And, you know, I guess I could confess that I was afraid someone would ask that at some point.
Yes, well, it's scary you even thought to, okay, cool.
Yes, it is. And you know what I would tell you is don't even worry about that.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a little bit of a story, continuing my development as a writer along the novel front, because Skipper's Oath is the second novel that I've ever written. The first one was when I was in my early 30s. It was called The A.B. Zone, and it was based on a Coast Guard guy, because that's what I had been in. You're supposed to write what you know, which is true to an extent. I want to talk about that at some point, because I buy it and I don't buy it at the same time. Because you can really get hung up on stuff like that. You get a piece of advice like that, and it can stifle you. It can really drag you down and make you not write because you're afraid there's some way you're supposed to do it. And what I would say is there isn't. There's no particular way to do anything, but when you hit the groove, you'll know you did.
Yeah.
You know? So I would say just keep doing whatever, write every day, just keep at it, and at some point it's going to click for you, and you're going to know how to do it.
Yeah.
So going back to the A.B. Zone, I had this great idea, wrote this thing, Tor looked at it, actually, the Big Five publisher, and they sent it back. I could tell that they got about 2/3 of the way through, and then they just, they sent it back and they said, it looks like a screenplay, send it to a a movie producer. This was like in the, I don't know, 90s sometime. And, I was cutting to a point, but at the same time, I knew that they were just looking for something else, and I knew that because I had a friend that the person who read it was actually his editor. So I know what they were thinking. He said, they just, she's going to tell you that because that's not what they need. That said, the criticism had good merit to it as well, and I learned from that and realized I need to do more with description rather than just relying on dialogue. And if you do read any of my books, you'll see there is a lot of dialogue, and that's partly driving things forward with the action, and dialogue is a form of action. So, but putting everything together, I think when you have good characters and you have some situation to put them into, this is what works for me. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
What worked for me with Skipper's Oath, because that was the first thing that really came together and was publishable. I had good characters, really solid characters, and I had a good situation to put them into. And so what I did was what Ann Tyler, the novelist, says she does. She creates good characters, puts them in a situation, and lets the story go. And so I decided I was going to try that. So I dropped them in there, had an idea of where I wanted the story to end up, but no idea how I was going to get there. So it's kind of like driving, We're in Long Island, right? If you want to go to Los Angeles, what are you going to do? You're going to consult a map, right? But you don't know exactly what's on your way. You might hit a road construction, or you might see on Waze, the app, that traffic is really backed up through Cleveland, so you're going to take a different route or something like that. That's how stories work, too, and you need to let that happen. You need to just let it go the way it goes. Always keep your characters in character, always. So when Ann Tyler and I now say drop a character into a situation, you have to keep them true to what they would really do, even if it doesn't fit where you wanted the story to go. You can figure that out later. Just keep writing. You can steer it back there, just like driving to LA. You may wind up going down I-something or other south, which is not headed west, but you know that at some point you're going to find some way to turn it back over that way. That's how you should look at your writing too. Don't feel like you have to nail everything down from the get-go. You don't. Figure it out as you go. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I clearly understand what you mean by using the knowledge you have and your experience. When you do that, I guess, then the characters sound real, right? But suppose you wanted to do a character from a historical period that you're intrigued with. So that requires research now, not your own experience. You have to go. So you could get caught up on that. How much history do you really need to know? Can you just read one history book and feel that's enough to develop a character? No.
I would guess.
So what is the extent of research involved?
Yeah, not having written that way, and frankly, that scares the hell out of me. I don't know if I could do that. Just because of what you say, I would feel like there's always something out there that I'm missing, and some historian's going to come and just lambast me because I've overlooked some crucial piece. I would think so, but what I would say is, however you do that, I would think that you need to reach some kind of saturation point where you feel like the kind of information you're looking at, you start to see the same thing in every source that you look at. You've reached saturation, so at that point, I would think that you could have some confidence in your knowledge of the historical period, the kinds of things that went on, and all that.
But I was thinking, it's so hard to put yourself in the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and what it would be like for a man or a woman to see reality with a different filter. We have all these filters, and because of our education and whatever, you don't want to look back in time in a certain period and think, why is she thinking, let's say it's a female character, why is she thinking she can't do X, Y, and Z? I mean, thinking today, because we have a more egalitarian society and that kind of thing. So it just seems a little very difficult.
But you're on the right track. You know, I mean, because you're asking the questions, number one. You know, and the more questions like that you ask, the closer you're going to get to doing it the right way. The only thing I would ask there is, would they be asking those questions?
Yeah.
You know, if you're so immersed in your culture and you're so, as a woman, oppressed by society and the way things are set up, you know, are you going to be thinking about that? Are you going to see that? Are there indications in the character, if you're looking at writing a character who really existed, are there indications in that person's biography that indicate that they were aware and conscious of that? You know, maybe they are. Maybe all women were. Who knows? You know, and some were just silent about it. Many didn't have a voice. We know that. You know, those kinds of things. I think you pull that in as much as you can. But one thing you would never want to lose sight of is that ultimately that person is a character in your book. They're going to be a character. You can't. I think it would be.
You can't make it 100% authentic.
No,
right?
so you can't say
Maybe
this is
you can
how.
take a certain amount, and
Right.
then you can let your imagination.
Yep. Yep. I would think so.
I want to add to that, and that is, you asked the question, well, should you just read one book about the character? And of course the answer is no. But not only that, I think you really have to study the time.
The time, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. There's so much.
You want to get a sense of the language of the time.
Oh yeah, if you put in dialogue, it can't sound like contemporary dialogue, right? There's so much, it seems a little overwhelming.
But lately I've been reading Agatha Christie, and most of it takes place in, say, the 30s. And, you know, you definitely get a sense of the 30s in England or wherever the story is. So not only do you have to read about the history and multiple histories, the pros and the cons of the characters, but you also want to look at the zeitgeist. What's the spirit of the time?
Because that also, I agree 100% with what you're saying, because when you understand the period, then you can understand better the character. Because the actions that character performed during that period will tell you a lot about that person's character.
I would think if it's a historical
And
person.
it's part of the personality of the person that you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a historical figure, I would think too, get a book from a different country that talked about our history at that time. Because I have family that lives all over the world, and I can tell you, you know, when we think about somebody like, I don't know, some historical figure who we think is a hero and they think as a traitor. So the Brits see things very differently than we do, and I have a lot of family in Ireland and the British Isles. So you might be able to get a different perspective on that character. Just get a book written by somebody from another country.
So this is a good question that I can ask you, just because we're talking now about contemporary, and maybe you guys would be interested in this. How many swear words is enough? Okay, because it's a very contemporary book. You're talking about boaters, you're talking about people, sailors. Okay, and so I don't know if you think about that.
Oh yeah.
But and I'll just give you one cute little sentence, which how you came up with this, I don't know. But
I'm so afraid of what she's going to read.
No, seriously, I mean, I've got my reputation.
No, I hadn't thought about swear words, so this is a good question.
So anyway, it's about this murder, and they were asking each other who did it, and the guy says, who the hell knows? Could be anybody. Seriously, it really could anybody. But who do you think? Rick looked at him. Why are you asking that? How the fuzzy-ass bunny would I know? Now that's like the most contemporary, the most old-fashioned expression I've heard for a long time. So like, where did you pull this out of? And how many swears is enough?
Yeah. So
And
just
do you think about that?
to my own defense, the F word is all over in there. It's not like I was avoiding that. I wasn't. You know, it's that it fits his character. That's why.
All of
That's
it.
why it's in there.
That-
Yeah.
It's
Again.
that community.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a really good point, though, because I hadn't thought of that, because I don't really curse much, at least not in front of my grandkids. And I have a character who I guess should be really cursing a lot. Should really, really be cursing a lot.
Yeah. And
And I didn't even
some
think
of these
that.
characters do, absolutely. There's these. Listen, I don't let my 11-year-old read these books.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, in the first one, there's a 3-page scene that I'm always really nervous about because it's a little bit graphic sexually. And so I have forbidden the kids from reading that book unless I redact those pages.
You're right.
And it's not that I think that they're, you know, unaware of these there's nothing there that they haven't seen someplace else. It's that it's coming from me. That's what makes the difference. You know, the other book, the red-covered one, Stateroom Tryst, is completely clean. That one, I went at, and I know I'm not answering the question yet, but that one, I wanted the Bogart approach. It's a hard-boiled detective story. I wanted to take that 1940s style noir character and drop him into a modern-day setting and see if it would work. And all the reviews seem to indicate it's working. So I'm going to continue that series as well. But I wanted it to be like when you sit down, you know, well, we don't have VCRs anymore, but when you sit down and you're shopping for a movie on Netflix and you pull a Bogart movie off, you don't expect swear words.
Right.
You know that those aren't going to happen. You don't expect color because it's going to be in black and white. It's the way it is. And that's how I want the reader to approach those books, is it's not, they're not expecting swear words, which would be happening in real life, right? They're not expecting them because I've set it up differently. You know, and the key is once you set up a world for your reader to experience, you stay consistent with that, you know. The reader will follow along. It's what Coleridge called a willing suspension of disbelief. Same thing. Do you think that there's a private eye out there that doesn't say the F word? You know? Hell no, there isn't. They all do probably, you know. Everybody else does. But in that book, there's nothing like that. I think the most extreme word in there might be ass, and it's appropriate in the context, you know. But that's that. So what was the question again?
How many's enough, and do you think about that and you say, wait a minute, this is getting a bit much?
Yes.
It's getting in the way of the story, it's getting in the way of the conversation,
yes.
Something like that, because, you know, I mean, what I'm trying to, because we're talking about the craft of writing, and so that's why I'm asking these kind of questions, like, do you really think, you're writing the dialogue and you're like, wait a minute. You know, we're losing track here because all we're putting in is fuck everywhere.
Yep.
So that's all. I'm just trying to find out if you mindfully sort of
track it,
read out some of it, add some of it in, like you know how much is enough to get the story to the flavor that you're looking for.
Yes, I do. And in fact, I can tell you with the Fuzzy as a Pony, it was partly because, if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of fuck right around it. And so I wanted to break that up and get away from it. So that was part of it, you know, was getting away from that. So there's his character, and he was the right one to do it with because his character would fit for him to say something, you know,
More like that.
Andy Griffith-like,
So
you know. So, yeah.
That's a really good point, though.
It is something to. Now, Maureen, you had said earlier that you're reading your book out loud to yourself.
Myself.
This is where that is really handy, because when you're reading silently, those things might not jump out at you.
But a lot of grammar I'm catching.
Yeah.
Reading it out loud.
And if you read it out loud, any repetition you have is going to jump out at you, or any kind of lack of, especially in dialogue, rhythm to the speech, you know. And just to take Susan's question a little bit deeper, I'm even paying attention to the rhythm of the speech when the characters are speaking. So I sound it out, and I think about, okay, I mentioned earlier dialect, you know, and if Earl Derrick grew up in the South, I'm going to have elements of that in his speech.
Like the Irish guy in the pub.
Yes,
Seamus.
Well. Yeah.
Seamus.
Yeah. So I have an Irish bartender, and he speaks, you know, with an Irish accent. So how do I know that? Well, I have friends who are Irish, you know, that helps. And that plays into where he came from. But there's also the fact that it was a great connection, because Mattatuck's favorite beer is Guinness. And so that was a connection for him and the bartender to connect and kind of have an affinity that gave them something to start a relationship with. So all of those kinds of details can come in, absolutely. And you go with them, you know. Did I plan that out ahead of time? No, I didn't. Seamus was not even thought of it when I started the books, but I needed a particular kind of character and put him in there. So.
Okay, the next thing that I want to know, if you think about very carefully, and there's two parts to the question. So the first part is he comes across these two people fighting. There's a lot of fighting, like fisticuffs fighting. So there's the white-haired person fighting and the sandy-colored head fighting. So then he says, Whitey stepped forward and hammered his right fist down on the back of Sandy's neck. Sandy's chest made a muffled thump as it hit the wood deck. So now he's taken to calling them Whitey and Sandy, which I think is cool. But then there's the other part of it, which is there are many very nice male characters that are of a group, and all of them go by their first name except for Frank Matatuck, and you always use his last name. So is that something that you've done very mindfully, or is it did it just happen that way?
When I first thought of him and his name, it was Matatuck, and then I found a first name. So it really, it worked that way. And Matatuck is the Matatuck from Long Island. My wife and I were driving out to Greenport, and I said, that'd make a great name for my character. And lo and behold, there it is. So.
Okay, so, because he's the only one who uses last name.
Right.
Everybody else you use their first
Everyone
name.
else's first name.
I mean, sometimes you'll use their whole name,
Mm-hmm.
Rick, whatever his last name is or whatever. So you'll sometimes have their whole name there, but otherwise you use their first names, but you're always using Matatuck for Frank.
I actually hadn't even noticed that.
Yeah, so I'm just
it is interesting.
And then, I like the way you use the Sandy and the Whitey to describe this little fighting scene, which is really just a diversion. So sometimes you'll just have these diversions, or you'll be on the water and there'll be descriptions about the boats or the Alaska. And so there's some richness in there that you just put in, like as a diversion or to make the story really complete. But that Matatuck versus the first names thing I thought was very interesting. So just thought we could discuss that.
No, and I appreciate that. Yeah, that's it's interesting what you get back from your readers, that you didn't even notice that you were doing. So.
In that vein, I noticed in the media that Donald Trump is always written as Donald Trump, not Mr. Trump or President Trump. It's almost always Donald Trump.
Oh, that's interesting.
And if you think about it,
Yeah.
it's just, just the point you're making.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder why that is. The Whitey and the Sandy thing, that's kind of a flow question, So I didn't want to get bogged down in the guy with the sandy-colored hair or the guy with the white, and it's a nice descriptor. And if you make the right shift in going from the description to making it a name, like a fill-in name, readers just go with you. They just ride right along with you, and it becomes then almost like a name for them, and it works. It
Also,
tags
Whitey
them.
and Sandy isn't like a detrimental name, like you'd say fatty or thinny.
Right.
Like people might get offended by that, but you wouldn't get offended by people being called Whitey and Sandy, since they aren't major characters anyway. So it added to the flow of this fighting. The one, this one hits that one, Sandy and Whitey. It was nice, quite a nice fighting scene because nobody really died from that fighting scene. So it was pretty good.
They do later, but
Not that time.
It's also reasonable nicknames. I mean, there are plenty of people who are called Whitey or Sandy, so they're very good nicknames.
Yeah, Whitey Bulger, wasn't he?
Oh, Whitey Bulger, yeah.
it could work for any descriptor. If you
Wow.
capitalize it and throw a Y on the end of it, you're good. You're good to go.
Bloody.
I had a question about the title of any book you write. Where does that come in? Do you get a title in mind at the beginning, or does you just start writing with the storyline, and then it comes much later?
With Skipper's Oath, it actually had a different title to start with, and then, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Was I saying that?
But do you start with the title?
With
Knowing
the,
that it could be changed.
With the other two, I knew the title before I started writing the books. Hinchinbrook's Hunted, that's easy because Hinchinbrook is the island they're on. I wanted the alliteration. So Hinchinbrook's Hunted, and there was a hunting theme going on where they're hunting this killer, but actually the killer winds up hunting them, and there's a sort of reversal kind of thing going on. So, kind of adds a little mystique to it, who's hunting who, and so it worked well with that. the thing that I want to do with the whole series, you'll notice that I have that face. So I have this artist contracted for the whole series, however long it goes, and she'll be putting that face on every one of them because I want to brand them. I want the books branded, so that's why the face is there. But the titles are also a branding thing. Notice that they're all, you know, possessive, noun, you know, with whatever the word is after. So Skipper's Oath, Poacher's End, Hinchinbrook's Hunted, they're all like that. And then when Norm Peck's going to come back at some point, and he's with that Ewing thing I was talking about, he'll be away from the Ewing then, he's just a great villain. When he comes back, it's called The Ranger's Return. I already have the title for that one. I don't even have the plot out yet. But,
So is that possessive structure? Is there a reason you like that? I mean, is there...
it works. It just
works. Does it
works.
make it more active in some way?
You find ways to do that. You know, once, I mean, I've already got 7 more books mapped out, most of them plotted completely, somewhat plotted out, you know. Not all of them have titles yet, but I know I'll be able to come up with something, you know. It's not that difficult. The key is I want branding, you know. Those who were with me in the last session that I did, 2 things you always want to think of. The cover, do not spare any expense on the cover. Hire someone to do it well. The cover sells the book. I don't care what, anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. It sells the book. The other thing that's crucial is the title. Have a title that has some element of intrigue to it, something that's going to make them wonder, oh, what is that? You know, what's this mean? You have those 2 things, you're going to sell books, frankly. Now, whether you sell beyond the first book, that's what matters, chapter 1 to 30. That's going to sell your next book. But the cover and the title will sell the first book. So just about anyone, I was telling Maureen, there's a lot of indie authors out there, and a lot of them, I would say, of what I've seen, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but 90% of them are crap. You know, the books are really not that good. It might be grammar stuff, it might be that they haven't really thought through the story, it might be, there's lots of reasons why, but they'll sell their first book because they have a good cover and a good title. They'll never sell a second book because, you know, because the people will,
Yeah.
that first
Is it bad
impression.
that I don't have an official title yet?
No.
Okay.
No. It would be bad if you put it out there without an official title. But up until that moment.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, I have 2 questions, and the second one I don't remember, but...
It'll come to you.
Right, hopefully it comes back. But the first one was, did you ever have to combine 2 worlds in a story?
Combine 2
2 worlds, kind of like more like sci-fi maybe, yeah.
Well, the UFO story, going back to my 7th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I did there. I don't remember, I do still have the story.
Do you still have it? I was just wondering how that the crossover, how that melded for you.
Yeah, so what's the closest thing that I've done? Because I don't know that I can really answer the question.
Yeah.
I haven't done it, you know,
Yeah.
so, but to a certain degree, they're always doing it.
Right.
You know? So when I crawl into Frank Matatek's mind, and that's really what I do, when I'm writing a scene with him, I'm him, you know? And then when Monica is there, I'm Monica. So this is where I've benefited from my friends in the acting world. I have a lot of friends in theater. And that idea of we're always putting on a mask, always putting on a mask. You know, right now, I'm a writer, talking to writers, you know? I go back to my office, I'm an executive dean worried about air conditioning and if it's going to be working, you know, stuff like that. I go home and I'm the dad to a 3-year-old and a 20-year-old and, you know, I'm a husband, you know. There's so many different masks that we put on and we're constantly doing that.
Oh, I remember the second question.
When you're writing, when you're writing, you're doing that same thing. So embody your characters, be an actor, picture a stage, and you're walking up there, and now you're that character. You know, you were talking about historical figures. You have to do that same thing. You have to get into that person. The thing with historical characters is you're bound by what they really were, you know, or at least within a certain.
Well, not thinking of necessarily famous person.
Still, they really existed, and if there's stuff out there on them, you're bound by that. So you can't say that they went to Alabama when they'd never been there. So.
Did you say something about not having like publishers? Or you published it yourself? Is that what you did?
Yes, all of these are self-published.
That's
yeah.
really awesome. How did
Yeah.
you do that? Where did you find
Yeah.
the tools to do that?
So catch me another time because that's really involved.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But you can self-educate. You can start with Amazon has KDP,
Oh, yeah.
the Kindle publishing, self-publishing tools. The paperbacks are through CreateSpace, which is Amazon owns CreateSpace, so it's a nice little crossover there.
Yeah.
There's a whole gamut of things to learn about marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I recently found out, I've been kind of feeling down, this is where I'm going to do a little self-reflection that maybe goes beyond my usual comfort level.
Good.
But I recently found out that I'm doing really well as an indie author. I've been feeling like, wow, they're not flying off the shelf, And that's because I don't have that big 5 PR machine pushing this in front of people all the time. And so, I sell 30 to 40 books a month.
That's
and
great.
That's really good, yeah.
Depends on the late night shows.
It's what?
That's
Depends on the
right.
late night shows.
I need to get on Oprah.
Yes, absolutely.
Or whatever, that's morphed into.
Right.
I need to get on to that.
And every book she recommended.
But, and how have I done that? I think I've tapped into the right reviewers. If you hop on either Goodreads or Amazon, there's a lot of really good reviews. On the whole, I'm averaging 4.5 out of 5 stars. That's better than most of the best-selling authors out there. And that gets people's attention. And, so I'm doing something right. And I sell the second, third, and fourth book. And there's quite a few people out there that are saying, when's the next one coming out? And I've had to say, I'm working on my dissertation right now, so I had to slow down, but they're looking for it. And just a little more kind of self-indulgent stuff we touched on earlier. I can't remember who made, well, you made the observation of something that I hadn't noticed before. There's a guy out there that really loves my books. He wanted to buy poster versions of the covers. He's really into these books. And he wrote something, he did this kind of essay on my background and my influences based on where I've lived geographically. And at first, Tanya, my wife, said, isn't that a little weird? And I thought at first, well, yeah, but people do this with authors all the time, so to him, it's no different. We know me, I'm just Wes, but to him, I'm an author, And so he noticed something, a thread through my work, no matter, where it says San Diego or Alaska or Argentina. He noticed some common elements, and he wrote about those, and I read them, and at first I thought, wow, really? Oh, and then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what, he's right, actually. I can see that thread running through there, so you really do kind of leave yourself, you put yourself out there, and then people pick up on that, and they get to know you in ways that maybe you didn't even notice yourself, so.
I'm stuck by that idea of write what you know, and my field is creative nonfiction, so technically I'm supposed to know it, but I think there's you just know emotional truth too. It's not, because you mentioned sci-fi, I mean, how could I write about sci-fi? I haven't been an alien so far.
Are you a mother? Then you were an alien.
Yeah.
That's right.
At least
Yeah.
And the good news is none of your competition has been either, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So everybody
Yes,
writing sci-fi
yes.
is in the same boat.
Yeah, so I mean, so you could write what you don't know. You're writing, but you're using, whatever, emotional truth, experiences, what you know of life, but not the particulars.
But I think you would
Per se.
create characters. So
Right.
your aliens might be, you need to think about their history and what kind of
Yeah.
world they live in and
Yeah.
how do they think, how do they see things when they come here or interact with human beings. How do they see us? That's kind of, it sounds like fun actually to try to figure all that out. So I think it comes back to, Ann Tyler's a huge influence on me, and she's so into character as the crux of the book. I think maybe that applies there too. If you create the characters really well, then whatever the situation is, it's going to drive the story. That's going to drive the story. The only other element we haven't talked about, I started the parking lot up here for us to come back to if we wanted to, but we haven't talked about conflict. I talked about characters and dropping them into a situation, but what you absolutely have to have is some kind of conflict. Someone needs to be trying to do something, otherwise your readers aren't going to care. Even Robert Frost said that poetry has to have that dramatic element. And by that, he means conflict. There has to be some kind of tension that's driving stuff, otherwise your readers won't care. So, what's the alien trying to do?
Right.
And
Yeah.
how does that encroach on humankind? And how are we going to respond to that? And then you have all this technology that I assume they're more advanced than we are. What are you going to do about that, you know? And
Right. How are they gonna work together?
the good news is as an author inventing all this stuff, you don't actually have to make it work.
Right.
You know, you get to say it works and it does.
That's true, nobody's been to the other world yet.
I know.
If you think about it, you know, we were talking about historical characters or stories and how limiting those are. In a way, even though my stories are not historical at all, I'm still bound to the real world, right? When you go into sci-fi, that's even more freeing, you know, because you can break up some parameters that are there with regular stories. In literary fiction, the same thing, you know. Once you start on a path, your reader will follow you, but they're going to expect you to stay consistent. So whatever you do with the sci-fi world, you're going to have to stay consistent with whatever that is. So,
Right. It was
that makes
kind of
sense.
the hard part for me was that I was like kind of jumping worlds. So I'm like, how do I make sure that they know where we are when we jump? Because there's like 3 or 4 different worlds. And it just came to me, that idea, because one of my friends who also writes was reading it, and he was like, you should just stick to 2 worlds. And I'm like, but I can't stick to 2 worlds. There's like 10. Like, how do you stick to 2? So that's just trying to make it cohesive.
So what I hear there is the story says there's 10 worlds.
Yeah.
Then you have to have 10
It
worlds.
has to be 10 worlds.
Yeah.
And you just have to know.
And you need to
how
figure
describe
out
it.
how to guide your reader from place to place. So, you know, you can use white space in a simple Transylvania,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And your reader now knows, oh, we're in that world now, you know, and they're going to look at it that way. So you can do it as simply as that. You could, in fact, I would say, do it that way, because it's really clear for your reader then.
Right.
You don't get 4 lines in the
And
first
like, even if I
paragraph.
want to get like fantasy, like even if they just get that highlight that, okay, so we switched and we can be dramatic.
Yes,
Right.
yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense to put a line there.
Yeah, I would do that just because, again, you never want your reader, you were touching on this, Susan, when you were talking about the bad language kind of stuff. You never want your reader to stop and wonder where they are. You
Right,
don't
that's
want
my
them to
problem.
stop and think about the fact that they're reading. You want them to be so immersed in the world that they're not even noticing they're reading, they're just going along with the world. I love Elmore Leonard. If you guys don't know this guy, man, he's another influence of mine. Love him. Elmore Leonard wrote a lot of suspense books. He's dead now, but he said once, I try to leave out the parts that people skip. I love that. Get that down. I love that. I try to leave out the parts that people skip. In other words, if it's not, you know, get in tune with what the reader is going to be interested in, what's going to help them draw along. But it kind of touches on that idea too that if you do a paragraph, it might be more creative, and people might applaud you for that, but other people will be pissed off with you because they had to figure out where they were by reading the paragraph. It depends on the reader, and it depends on how you do it. If it works the way you're doing it, I would run it by a few people, you know. And if they seem fine with it, then you're good. Then you're good.
If you look at flashbacks, you've got changes in time, and you're describing changes in space. It's the same idea.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly true. Because they're almost even sometimes happening simultaneously.
Right.
You know, so that's another, it's another element.
No, just changes in scene.
Yeah.
All right, so can we just do one more?
Sure.
Okay, so firstly we can talk a little bit about how you wrote a novella. So maybe for new budding writers, maybe a novella is where you would start. And the novella is just all action. There is some introspection at the end, but I'll just read you a little portion. This is a youngster who's a very good cyclist, thinks he's the greatest, thinks in sliced bread, goes up to Argentina to do this extreme ride, and unfortunately he comes across it. So this is just one piece that I thought was very good, like realistic fiction. A sharp pain shot up his forearm from the wrist caught in the spokes, and the wheel pulled and tugged angrily at hand and wrist, its tenacious hold on the wrist unyielding. And basically the poor guy ends up with his hand stuck in that spoke until he gets rescued, but I won't tell you the rest of the story. But anyway, what I'm saying is if you wanted to get started, like a novella, well, I'm not saying what one should or shouldn't do, but let's just say that Wes wrote this novella and it's all action. There is introspection at the end and a little philosophy, but if that's what helps you to get started with your craft, it's a good way because it does keep the reader going like this.
I would take that a step further and say you have to convey stuff through action. You can't stop. Do you guys know Henry James? He has this. I really studied Henry James. He's really good at psychological realism. That's what he's applied for. So you have it. He's almost formulaic with his own writing. You'll have a chapter that goes into psychological introspection, and then you have the so-called action or societal, whatever's happening, people talking and things like that. Don't do that. Whatever you're trying to convey about your characters, try to do it through the action or with little spurts here and there or little hints. Even the longer novels, I do that as much as I can. The characterization comes through what they're doing. In other words, show, don't tell.
Not how much character the character has, or like I know you're saying.
I'm sorry?
Is that how much character the character has, or not? Just more their action and what they're, and maybe some introspection, but not like you don't build on the character's beliefs or integrity or like you do, but I'm not really sure what you're saying.
Well, maybe an example would work. So you read from Monica, and there she's very consciously thinking for the reader to see. Monica does that. Frank Matituck doesn't. So Frank Matituck, you'll get little snippets of internal things with him, but he's not a very reflective guy. He's more of an action guy. He just lives, and he's surviving, and certainly he's got a depth to him and everything. But he doesn't process things in the same way Monica does. Monica thinks them through, and she thinks about what she's doing. It's to be expected, She's a trained lawyer. She is well educated, so that's her way.'s more intellectual, if you will. Whereas Frank Matituck, everything that you're getting from who he is inside is coming through what you see of his actions, how he reacts to people, the things that piss him off, that make him haul off and hit someone, tells you something about his character. So Monica would never do that. She would think through, where are they coming from? What are they doing? And you would get that in the reflection pieces.
And then I'll just do one more, and then you can carry on with it, which is a craft thing which you talk a lot about, which is dialogue. Use a lot of dialogue, and I would say that's a big feature in all of your, even this one, which is really the story of one person. But anyway, at the end, I just wanted to read this dialogue because I thought it was really great. So Matt is the youngster who goes up the mountain by himself. Of course, big hero, falls down, gets rescued. And finally, he's just at home recovering, and his friend Ski comes to, is it Ski?
Ski.
Okay, so they were silent for some time. Oh, Matt nodded, still gazing at the pines. That's changed in you, it's not there. They were silent for some time, sipping their coffee and taking in the lush green outside. Finally, Ski went on. What happened to your demons, man? Matt looked at his friend. Ski's dreadlocks hung to his shoulders, giving him a distant Rasta look. I don't know, Matt said, his lips drawn in a somber smile. Maybe they domesticated. So I thought that was just a wonderful little way for us to know he learned his lesson or something. So the way that you use dialogue to tell the story is
right.
Really good.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, and that's a perfect example actually, because I could have told that.
Right.
It could have come through him self-reflecting or something like that. But no, and in fact, what Susan just read is why Ski comes and visits him. That's why I wrote him in there. Otherwise, he wasn't going to be there.
Yeah.
But it was for that line that she just read, so that he could say it instead of And what I wanted to capture there, the idea of he's domesticated his demons, implies that they're still there. They haven't gone anywhere. He's just learned how to control whatever tortures him. So that book, by the way, is very Zen. So I'm Buddhist. The book taps into that very deeply, and you see that in the end. And there's been a lot of pressure for Matt and Jess, this female character, who helps them kind of attain somewhat of an enlightenment, for them to get together. And I hate that idea because that's not the point. The point is that he comes to terms with himself, and part of that is not dependent on any other person. And Jess's character, I'll just give it away. She's my favorite character I've ever developed. She's She is, I love Jess. She's amazing. So, and if you read it, you'll see why that is. She's very zen. She doesn't need Matt, and she doesn't need a relationship. She doesn't need, she's a freelancing videographer. She doesn't need a job. She doesn't a steady job. She does what she does, and there's a lot of mystery in the book about what that is exactly. When she leaves, and Matt and she take their separate ways, no one knows where she goes or what she's doing, and it doesn't matter. That's the point. It doesn't matter because what happened in the book happened here, and that's what's significant. Would there be a sequel to this? Probably not ever. Will I grab Matt and pull him into another book? No, it would ruin Matt in this book if I did. And same thing with Jess. I love the idea of building a story around her, but I can't. I'm not gonna do that because she's perfect in this book. So.
Do you start out with a point that you're trying to make and then build a story for it?
No.
Or do you just make points as they happen?
They just happen, yeah. So even that line there, that just came to me as I was approaching that scene. How am I going to bring this to where I want the story to be? Which is this idea of on rocks and clouds. He's sitting there and he's reflecting on when he used to backpack, and he would come up, and he knows that he's going to have to go back down into the clouds and the dreary stuff, because that's what you do in life. You have to. But he knows, too, that he could at any point climb back out and be outside of it. And that's the Zen point of the whole book is, that I knew I wanted to get to. But that's the only book that's ever happened with. All the others are just stories. I'm just trying to tell a great, engaging story. On Rocks and Clouds, I was trying to be more philosophical.
Short stories and novellas are fit for that application.
I think so, because you can focus them in more. I think that's true. Other conscious of people's time, I don't know.
Have you ever been writing a book and think that you put too much information, it's too long?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do you know when it's too long or too short?
It just feels it. I feel like that's a cop-out answer, and I'm sorry. It just feels right.
I asked because a friend of mine wrote a book and he published it himself also, and he kept going off in some different directions, and I'm like,
you can't do that.
Yeah, I couldn't even finish the book because he kept losing me.
Yeah, you can't do that. You have to. So when we go back to your sci-fi story, I didn't get your name.
Oh, Stephanie.
Stephanie, when you go back to that, keep that in mind when you're jumping around the 10
I
worlds.
heard her say that, and then I was a little distracted in my mind.
And his book also was kind of like a sci-fi in real life. It had to do with Brookhaven National Lab, and then he jumped over to the Poconos. And
because he probably had a lot of truths and things going on. He didn't know where to put the...
Right, it got scattered.
Yeah, it's really hard. That was hard. And it was very creative, but it's very scattered. So, how do I? Right,
well, what's the main storyline?
The storyline. Okay, so it's basically there's this mother and this daughter who come to Earth from Mars, and they're leaving behind a whole family, like a whole another family. They come to Earth from Mars, and but through the transfer of coming to Earth, they get changed. Their lives are different now, so they're not together anymore. And the mother is conscious of this because she was more developed when they came over. The child didn't even make it past her womb yet, so the child goes into the life as a child without knowing what's going on. And so the mother spends thousands of years trying to look for her child because her psychic senses they're not the same on Earth now.
Okay.
So, but she can still live longer because she came from another planet. She can see through the dimensions. She has that ability for whatever reason, And so the whole story is they're trying to find each other. There's another lover involved that they left behind on the planet, but the lover was upset because she wasn't into coming to Earth. So it's a big story, but I just don't know how to put it.
But it's all together.
It's all cohesive.
Yeah, it's very cohesive. So
it's just the finishing details.
as long as you stay focused on all of that, and if you have something else pop into your head, the Catskills Mountains pop into your head, and you want to write that in there, why?
Right.
What's that going to do for the story?
Right.
That might be where your friend got off track a little bit, was not staying focused on that. So if you can justify why you're doing everything, it's going to come together. And even if you don't consciously know how that's happening,
Yeah.
try it out anyway. Just keep going, you know, and then see what you come back and you can revise.
Yeah.
You should revise.
Yeah, have to keep editing, you know. And
Yeah. That's the real work of writing, is the revision. So that's where you go back and you say, okay, that didn't really work.
Right, sometimes I'll take a chapter over here and then put it right somewhere else, and then it works. I think it gets smoother.
Maybe, yeah. Or
Okay.
maybe you have to cut something out. Now you're
Yeah.
a surgeon. How do I extract this from the story and pull it all back together, stitch it together?
And,
Sorry for the imagery.
no, it's okay. It's fine.
comes with being a writer.
Well, your idea is great, where read it out loud to yourself.
Yes.
Because I mean, I do that with everything I do,
Yeah.
notes, memos, emails. I read it out loud, and if it doesn't make sense to me, how is somebody else going to make sense of it?
Right.
That's right. And at some point you get good at that, and you don't have to do it out loud. You hear it. You've got the voice going in your head. That's where I am. I'm writing, and I can hear the dialogue without sounding it out, and the kids thinking I'm weird. You know? So.
Do you do anything with digital books?
Yes.
I guess that means a publication.
Yeah, so going back to the question of self-publishing, the paperbacks cost the most to put out there, and they're not even 5% of the sales. It's almost all ebooks. So it's interesting because I just made the shift 2 days ago back to Amazon, so I could put the books on Kindle Unlimited, which is people pay $10 a month, and then they can read as many books. You get paid by the page. And so I had pulled them out of that, put them on Smashwords so they could go out on iBooks and everything. And for 2 months I had really good sales. And then bam, it bottomed out. And now I'm saying, maybe I should put it back on Kindle Unlimited and see if I can get that readership going and see how it goes.
Can't you
Maybe
do both?
back over. No, because Amazon, I hate Amazon. I really hate Amazon. They really control you. So if you put your books on Kindle Unlimited, you are not allowed, legally not allowed to have them available electronically anyplace else. So I had to shut them down on iBooks and everything in order to do this. But I'm kind of doing an experiment. I think I'm going to go back to the Smashwords option and put it out there where it's available on Nook and everything else. But we'll see. I'm just tracking the sales and doing a comparison to see what happens.
Does Kindle Unlimited, does that also include regular Kindle? So you
Yeah.
can sell the book on Kindle.
Uh-huh.
Somebody can buy it, download it for $3.95 or however much you charge.
That's right.
But also, if they have the subscription of Kindle Unlimited, they can just do that as well.
Yep. So they do their monthly fee. They pay their $10 and they can read as many books as they want for free that are on Kindle Unlimited. And then the author gets paid for each page that's read. So, and honestly, I was making a lot of money doing that. So, I wasn't making as many sales, but in total, I had more readers. So, I don't know, I may have to cave and just say, okay, Amazon owns the world. I just have to
Yeah.
go with that.
Thank you.
Do you have an email address for your?
Yeah, I have a website too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
so
write that
it's
down.
pwesleylundberg.com. And you can there's a contact page there. But the email is pwesleylundberg@gmail.com.
Okay.